Reflections. The Without God Mind. Excerpts from God is Closer Than You Think by John Ortberg. The natural tendency of my mind, apart from God, is toward death, not life. Psychologist Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi has done years of research in which thousands of subjects are given pagers that go off at random intervals. People have to write down what they are doing and thinking and feeling when that happens. One of the most striking findings of these studies involves the effect of solitude. When people are alone, undistracted by noise or activity, their minds naturally drift toward an unawareness of discontentment, a sense of inadequacy, anxiety about the future, and a chronic sense of self-preoccupation. Csikszentmihalyi writes, contrary to what we tend to assume, the normal state of the mind is chaos. When we are left alone, with no demands on attention, the basic disorder of the mind reveals itself. With nothing to do, it begins to follow random patterns, usually stopping to consider something painful or disturbing. Entropy is the normal state of consciousness. To avoid this condition, people are naturally eager to fill their minds with whatever information is readily available, as long as it distracts attention from turning inward and dwelling on negative feelings. This explains why such a huge proportion of time is invested in watching television, despite the fact that it is very rarely enjoyed. This is why people generally flee from solitude. When parents want to punish a child, the number one method is a timeout.
Do not move until the timer goes off.
The most hated punishment prison inmates receive is solitary confinement. Why are these so feared? Because people hate to be alone with their minds. Television is attractive because it distracts us, but of course in the long run it simply makes our minds that much weaker and more dependent on outside stimulation to keep us entertained. This is precisely what Paul is getting at when he warns the church at Ephesus not to live any longer like those who are far from God in the futility of their thinking. They are locked up in death-producing thoughts. The ultimate outcome of such living is described by Paul in his letter to the church at Rome. God gave them over to a depraved mind. These are some of the most chilling words in Scripture. Someone given over to a depraved mind experiences unending discontent, relentless fear, and unending self-obsession. A person like this doesn't need any outside form of torture to punish them. This is the depth of human misery and pain, and God just gives them over to it. But God never desires that our minds be filled with despair or tormented by unsatisfied longings. God's desire is for us to have a mind permeated by life-giving thoughts. Paul wrote to the church at Rome for people to be transformed by the renewing of your minds. He doesn't say transform yourselves by renewing your minds. Only God can change a mind. This explains why Paul wrote to Timothy that God has not given us the spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of a sound mind. When God is present in a mind, it begins to flow with a new kind of thought. But there is a role for us to play. We can, by choice and by our actions, invite God to be present in our mind, or we can close the door to Him. It all depends on what kind of mind we want to cultivate. So let's walk through 3 options. Number 1. Maybe your goal is debauchery, lechery, and depravity. It's not hard to cultivate a mind like this. You can do it. Just be careful about what you do and don't put into your mind. You will find your thoughts running along these lines. He's more successful than I am, and that makes me feel bad. I hope he fails at something. There's a girl jogging up ahead. I wonder if she's attractive enough so I can get a little jolt of sexual gratification by looking at her. That guy has a more expensive car than I do. He must be pretty greedy. That guy has a junkier car than me. He must be pretty low on the totem pole. What if I don't succeed at school today? I'll carry a cloud of anxiety all day. I'm late for this meeting. The truth is, I didn't allow enough time to get here, but I'll just say it's because the traffic was bad. I'll spin the truth to manage people's impressions. She's so attractive. I feel threatened by her. I'm going to believe bad things about her. The moods that will dominate your life are resentment, anxiety, unsatisfied desire. The key to maintaining this inner life is found in Psalm 10, verse 4. In their pride the wicked do not seek him. In all their thoughts there is no room for God. It's not hard to cultivate this kind of mind. All you have to do is avoid contact with anything that would disrupt this flow of thoughts. Avoid scripture. Avoid wise and honest people who know you deeply. Avoid honest self-examination. Avoid contact with people in need who might move you to compassion. Avoid looking for Waldo. Mostly you have to make sure that in your thoughts there is no room for God. Stay tuned to other channels. Number 2. If your goal is to have a mediocre spiritual life, you can do a half and half deal. The Bible talks about this. One writer speaks of a condition called double-mindedness. In the Jewish tradition, it is called the Yetzer Hara, the wayward heart. Jesus himself refers to a church suffering from what he called lukewarmness. It is neither cold nor at the boiling point. It doesn't experience any change of properties. This condition enables you to get the worst of all worlds. You experience a kind of chronic, low-level hidden debauchery, so you're frustrated by all the fun you think that major league debauchery professionals are having. Yet you get just enough spiritual religious input so you have chronic low-level guilt about the amount of depravity you are maintaining. How do you pursue this goal? Get sporadic spiritual input. Go to church sometimes, read the Bible once in a while, but without clarity about how you want it to shape your mind. Pray sporadically when you're in trouble, but then mostly fill your mind with the things that everybody else in our culture fills their minds with. Just keep spiritual channel surfing. There is a third alternative. Make your mind the dwelling place of God. The goal here is to have a mind in which the glorious Father of Jesus is always present and gradually crowds out every distorted belief, every destructive feeling, every misguided intention. You will know your mind is increasingly set on God when the moods that dominate your inner life are love, joy, and peace, the three primary components of the fruit of the Spirit. I face a crisis. I remember that I am not alone. The Lord is my shepherd has become part of my mental furniture. I don't have to be bigger or smarter than I am. I live at peace. Somebody praises me. My first thought and feelings move toward God's goodness in my life. I experience a little surge of joy. Somebody condemns me. I remember that God supports me because he loves me. I don't have to appease or blast the critic. I can love. God is never more than a thought away. Frank Laubach wrote, "We can keep two things in mind at once. Indeed, we cannot keep one thing in mind more than half a second. Mind is a flowing something. It oscillates. Concentration is merely the continuous return to the same problem from a million angles. So my problem is this: can I bring God back in my mind flow every few seconds so that God shall always be in my mind as an after image, shall always be one of the elements in every concept and precept? I choose to make the rest of my life an experiment in answering this question. To make my mind a home for Jesus, I deliberately fill my mind with the kinds of things God says are important. Paul puts it like this: finally, brothers and sisters, whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is admirable, if anything is excellent or praiseworthy, think about such things. We often want to be able to hear guidance from God about important decisions, such as who to marry or what job to take. But we also want to reserve the right to feed our minds on whatever junk comes along. Whatever repeatedly enters the mind occupies the mind, eventually shapes the mind, and will ultimately express itself in what you do and who you become. The events we attend, the material we read or don't, the music we listen to, the images we watch, the conversations we hold, the daydreams we entertain, these are shaping our minds, and ultimately they make our minds receptive or deaf toward the still small voice of God. Paul says, we take every thought captive. That sounds exhausting. Do we have to filter 185 billion mental images through the course of our lives? But of course, we don't do this on our own. God will help us fill our minds with the right kind of thoughts. God is never more than a thought away.